Chomi, I had a thought the other day. This word just kept replaying itself over and over again in my mind. And the word is enmeshment. And when I sat with it, I'm just going to read what I wrote about it and then maybe unpack it a bit further. But here's what I wrote. Patriarchal systems flourish in enmeshment where boundary lines are blurred. There is a strong sense of archetypal roles being fulfilled, an inordinate inability to ask for help because you are being judged on performance determined by the archetypal role you are playing in that structure, and a debilitating sense of perpetual inadequacy because the role you are playing doesn't fulfill you. It exhausts you at best and drains you at worst. Because we are dealing with humans that are unhealed, and we ourselves are unhealed. And we seek to exist in places and spaces and environments that fulfill the essence of who we are and can allow for you to embody who you are in a way that doesn't require you to perform a role or to wear a mask. But because we are unhealed, we are operating mostly from a sense of our wound. And that is what requires us to be performative in the first place, to not show up authentically. Because if you are authentic, you are putting yourself under the pressure of being hurt even more. Because you're reminded of a time in your life, typically in your childhood, where you were authentic and that authenticity was shunned or rejected or mocked or made fun of, whatever the case might be. So to protect yourself emotionally and to hide the wounding that you have experienced, you put on this role or you put on this performance of who you are going to be within the structure in order to be accepted. But because there's a lack of transparency, because it's hard to be vulnerable within that space, that is when these performances that mesh together start to have boundary lines that are blurred, right? If you're fulfilling the role of the trickster, there's no judgment or there's no inaccessibility towards somebody else's extent of their pain because you're playing the role of the trickster. So there's no marker in place, there's no boundary in place to say, okay, now you've gone beyond where you need to go, because that's the role you're fulfilling within that environment and within that space. So there's no genuine connection because it's all based on performance within the structure. But when you begin to see within yourself the role that you are playing and you begin to see how draining and exhausting it is, that's when you begin starting to be able or forced to confront the truth of the matter of why you would allow that within yourself in the first place. Where are the gaps that you have left open that you want others to fulfill for you? Because you fulfill so much for that structure in the role that you play that you automatically expect others to do the same for you. And that's when you begin to see that boundaries have been crossed because you are no longer true to the essence of who you are because of the performance that you have put in, because of your wanting to fit in within the structure, because you are operating from the wound of wanting to be seen, because when you are afraid of being rejected. But when you begin to heal, you begin to seek and want and yearn for structures that are pillars, that are anchors, right? But they're flexible because after all, we are human. They are pillars and they're anchors, but they're flexible because they accommodate the humanity of each person within that relationship and within that structure. They can afford to be vulnerable. They can afford to be tired. They can afford to be real because they have this ability to ask for help, to speak up and not be afraid of judgment or being mocked or whatever the case might be, right? because now we're able to accept each other's humanity within these structures, then those structures are more successful because your nervous system begins to relax within those structures, which means then you're able to thrive even more. Guys, let us speak ease into the pillars that we are building in our lives. That yes, we acknowledge that structures are there that anchor pillars and are there to bring balance and what am I saying? Equate balance, yeah, hold the weight equally, right? But it begins to fluctuate and it begins to desecrate when those pillars are such that they are not authentic and they are not sustainable. That's the word I'm looking for. They're unable to be sustained because they do not take into consideration the humanity required for the relationship within the work of these pillars of anchoring, within the work required within these structures to be flexible and to have ease. And the crux of what I'm saying is that as we continue to build structures and put structures in place in our lives that are pillars and that anchor structures and certain structures, mindsets, practices, things that we want to be consistent with, let us give ourselves and others the grace to remember our humanity in the process of building these structures and taking into account and into consideration that we sometimes need help, that we sometimes struggle, that we sometimes need to be vulnerable and offer each other the safety to be able to do so that these pillars that yes are anchors and yes are boundaries, they do not become enmeshed in one another, but they can anchor each other within the structures that we're trying to build.